Hi guys. One thing I've seen repeatedly across the Discord channel and the Reddit is people asking questions like, how do I know if I should take plus melee damage over percentage increased physical or something of that like? And mathematically, this is actually something we can calculate very precisely on the assumption that if, like me, you found yourself at the training dummy equipping and unequipping weapons and trying skills and watching all the numbers, then this might be something that interests you. If you only want the short version, then the TLDR is that if you know what your parameters are that you want to compare, then you can use one of these three formulas to tell you exactly which one has a bigger impact on your final damage. So if you were to compare an added damage such as plus 10 melee with a percentage increase melee damage, then if you look at the ratio of those two numbers together, if it is bigger than all of this stuff on the right, then the added damage is more impactful. Conversely, if the ratio of those two values is less than all the stuff on the right, then your percentage increase is better for your final damage. We can do exactly the same thing for comparing a percentage increase to a percentage more, knowing that this one is additive and this one is multiplicative. In any case, sometimes you will find that a percentage increase is more impactful at a particular point in time than a multiplicative percentage more. Then finally, if somehow you find an item where all of a sudden you have a big boost to added damage and you are trading against a percentage more, then we have exactly the same approach. You can look at this ratio of the two numbers, and if it's bigger than this stuff on the right, then added is better, and if less, then your percentage more is better. Now, that's the short version. If that is remotely interesting for you and you want to take that away, then by all means stop here. Everything after this is going to be showing some algebra magic for why this is the relevant factor to look at when comparing each of these two parameters. So let's jump right in. Now, if you're still here, you will know that the total overall damage formula for last epoch looks something like this. We have a sum of lots of individual overall damages for a respective damage source and damage type combination, or a damage which is applicable to all. This is effectively what the player sends to an enemy when he hits with his sword or with a skill. Then that total damage is affected by some stats on the enemy, and here is where you will start to see your penetration, your armor or resistance shred, or your stats like takes increased damage, blah blah blah. And here I've represented it just as a total multiplicative more factor. But this bit we don't want to worry about today. We have the overall damage for a given source and type of damage. This is where most people, if they go down the rabbit hole, are going to spend the vast majority of their time looking at the damage of a particular skill in question. And you will see we have our flat and base damage on the left. We have our additive percentage increases in the middle. And then finally, our player side multiplicative more stats. I'm not going to go through all of these formulas, but basically this is how they all look. These are not a big secret. These are well documented on Maxroll. In fact, the game guide itself gives you the overall plan of these formulas, if not exactly like this. It just uses some numbers and an example. So I'm not going to debate the formulas themselves. I know that they work, albeit there are some specialties in certain cases. Generally, this is all you need. So now that we have that, what we want to look at is, let's say here, let's just get rid of this underline, is what happens when I add extra damage. Okay, so this is fundamentally the question that people are asking, is what happens if I do one thing instead of another thing? And so if we were to take the basic damage equation, which we're going to say is this guy right here, let's say we wanted to add some added damage, then inside this formula we have, if I get my parentheses correct, our added damage is going to sit over here, and if we wanted to, we would add on to our total added damage a new added new, that would be effectively our new, say, 10 melee fire as an example. And the key thing here, of course, is that these formulas are source type specific, so this formula is repeated for every combination that you need to look at, and that's all you would need to do. And then you would then work out what is your total new damage, which reflects that added flat damage. Then we could do the same thing for the increased. So instead of adding something over there, we'll come into this bracket and simply say, okay, well, I have an existing sum of some percentage increases, and now I'm going to add on a new percentage increase. We're going to call that new. It's very original. And we're just going to make that blue so we don't lose track of it. And that would give us our damage new, or let's maybe call this increase, and we'll call that one add, just so that we don't have a whole bunch of new damages. Then finally, very simply, we could say, instead of adding a percentage increase new, we can come over here. And a percentage more is, of course, multiplicative. So let's assume we already have some element of more damage here. Now this could be 1, assuming you have no multipliers. I've abbreviated it to be a combined factor just because it makes this job easier. But effectively for a new source of damage, for a more, we say add a more new, and that gives us our damage new more. So that is some super basic stuff, and that is what most people will have already done if they've gone down the rabbit hole of asking questions about the damage. But when does added damage become better than percentage increase? Or when does a percentage increase become better than a percentage more? And then finally, when does added damage become better than percentage more? Now that last one, probably not so frequent, but there are cases for sure where that will happen. And so now we'll show in the manipulation of the formulas how we can work out how that can be calculated. Now, obviously, if you've already put these formulas in a spreadsheet and you've got all the numbers, you'll probably just whack in a new factor, see if the total damage goes up or down, and that's all you'll need to do. That's fine as part of this sort of exploration. We can simplify things. So maybe this is useful, maybe not, but bear with me and we can see how we can simplify things when looking at these different types of parameters. Okay, so what we want to do is see what is the contribution of each modifier to the total damage independently. can spell that. Sure, let's go with that. And so if we were to look at the starting damage, or actually, do I already have the formula? I've used it up here. So if we start with our added damage formula, we can see that the new total damage is given by all of this stuff. We only want to know what is the contribution of this here. So let's expand this out and see what happens. So let's take this and put it down here. So we have our base, we keep that. Now we can expand the effect of the added effectiveness parameter and simply bring that in here. So we have the sum of our existing added damage times by the added effectiveness plus our new added damage times by the added effectiveness. So we have that, and then we have the existing two other brackets there. So that's still good. Now, if we take that a step further, let's see what we can do. We should now be able to take this out of this total bracket here. So let's see what that looks like. If we simply remove that from there and we add it here, what do we end up with? We have, let's get rid of, what's going on with my keyboard here? There we are. So we took it out of this bracket, which means we need to multiply it by all of this stuff. We take all of that and put that over here, doubling up a bit here. And we say that all of that is our new number. So what we've got back in the start, we have our base plus the sum of the added times the effectiveness. Okay, that's good. Then we're adding our new added damage times by the effectiveness times by the other buckets. So that all makes sense so far. And what we can now say is actually this is what we started with. This bit here is our starting point. So we could now just say that our new added damage, oh sorry, the total damage based on an added modifier is equal to this, which was our damage old, plus all of this. Now we could go a little bit further and just rename that. Actually, we will go further. We're going to need to. So that's what we already had. And since we want to know what is the independent contribution, well, now we can just take this bit and say, well, our new total damage, I really wish that wouldn't do that. Our new total damage is equal to our old damage plus, now let's just call this our damage add. Is that the best name for that? Let's call that damage delta add. And then we can say here our damage delta add is equal to all of this. Okay, that's getting somewhere.